This is the ultimate harrowing story of human endurance, naval tragedy, and the brutal consequences of war. The fate of the USS Indianapolis, CA-35, remains the single greatest loss of life at sea in U.S. naval history. It is a story marked by unimaginable horror, bureaucratic failure, and a 70-year quest for justice. The ultra-secret cargo and the fateful voyage. In July 1945, the war in the Pacific was grinding toward its horrific conclusion. The USS Indianapolis, a Portland-class heavy cruiser and the flagship of the Fifth Fleet, was an impressive vessel, but its final mission would be its most important and most secret. Under the command of the respected, though traditional, Captain Charles B. McVay III, the Indianapolis docked in San Francisco. Its cargo was loaded in utmost secrecy, two wooden crates containing the core components and enriched uranium for the Little Boy atomic bomb. Key detail: the ship was placed on a record-breaking schedule. It steamed from San Francisco to Tinian Island in a mere 10 days, covering nearly 5,000 miles, an incredible feat of speed. No one in the crew, except possibly Captain McVay, knew the true nature of their historic cargo. Their success guaranteed the destruction of Hiroshima. Mission accomplished. The USS Indianapolis was ordered to proceed to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines to prepare for the invasion of Japan. It was traveling alone. Despite intelligence indicating the presence of Japanese submarines along their route, the ship was not given an escort. Furthermore, multiple commands, including the port commander in Leyte and various Navy tracking stations, knew the ship was due, but no one was formally tracking its movement. A critical failure. The ship was logged to arrive in Leyte on July 31st. If it failed to appear, the Navy's standard operating procedure dictated an immediate inquiry and search. This procedure was never followed. The torpedoes and the 12 minutes. Just after midnight on July 30th, 1945, the ship was steaming at 17 knots through the Philippine Sea. On board the Japanese submarine I-58, Commander Mutsuchiro Hashimoto spotted the massive silhouette against the dark, moonless horizon. Hashimoto, who had spent months fruitlessly searching for targets, recognized a chance for glory. He ordered a spread of 6 torpedoes. At 12:15 a.m., 2 of those torpedoes found their mark. The first struck the Indianapolis's starboard bow. The force of the explosion was enormous, lifting the 10,000-ton ship out of the water. It vaporized the bow section, killed dozens of men instantly, and ignited the aviation fuel storage tanks, creating a pillar of fire. The second hit near the massive fuel tanks and powder magazines amidships. This torpedo sealed the ship's fate, knocking out all electrical power, communications, and emergency mechanisms. The ship immediately took on a massive list. Crew members below deck were trapped in rapidly flooding compartments. Others above deck rushed to their stations in darkness and confusion. Captain McVay, despite the chaos, ordered the ship stopped and the life rafts deployed, but the list was too severe. Less than 12 minutes after the first explosion, the mighty Indianapolis rolled completely over, its huge propellers rising vertically before plunging into the abyss. Approximately 300 sailors went down with the ship. For the remaining 890 men, a new, more horrifying ordeal was just beginning. The first day, exposure and the gathering dread. As the sun rose on July 30th, the 890 survivors were scattered across miles of open ocean, clinging to debris, scattered nets, and a few small overcrowded rafts. The landscape of agony, the oil slick. The surface of the water was covered with a thick, sticky layer of bunker C fuel oil. This actually saved some men from immediate drowning, but it coated their bodies, causing blindness, burning, and severe chemical burns, clogging their breathing. The sun. The equatorial sun beat down relentlessly. The men, who many were nude or in thin cotton clothing, suffered immediate and severe sunburn. The tropical heat combined with the oil created an unbearable thermal assault. Dehydration. Within hours, the need for fresh water became an unbearable obsession. The men were surrounded by water, yet none of it was drinkable. Saltwater ingestion caused rapid organ failure and hastened delirium. The sound of the sea. As the immediate shock subsided, the men began to hear the sound that would define their nightmare, the rhythmic splashing and slapping of water against their rafts and bodies. And then they came. The 7 days of the sharks. The sinking of a large vessel, particularly one that resulted in many bloody casualties, is a dinner bell for oceanic predators. The Indianapolis survivors found themselves floating in the center of a feeding frenzy involving hundreds of oceanic white-tipped sharks, Carcharhinus longimanus. These were not the coastal great whites, but deep ocean hunters. They are opportunistic, aggressive, and highly motivated by blood. Survivor testimony, Giles McCoy. The sharks were worse at night. You couldn't see them. You could just feel a bump against your leg and then hear the scream of a man being pulled under. They would grab a man, shake him, and the guy would just be gone. The targeting. The sharks initially targeted the dead or those with open wounds, but as the days wore on, they began to attack the weak, the isolated, and any man who drifted away from the relative safety of the main group. Psychological warfare. The attacks were not a single event, but a relentless 24-hour cycle of terror. Men slept or tried to, knowing that at any moment, the splashing next to them could mean the end. This constant fear eroded their will to live even faster than the lack of water. The pillars of death. Men would huddle together in a tight group. If a man died, the others would try to push his body away, knowing that the sharks would come for the corpse, and they did not want the feeding frenzy to occur right next to them. Hundreds of men were lost to shark attacks over the next 7 days. It remains the worst recorded shark attack in history. Madness and despair, the psychology of survival. By the 3rd and 4th days, the physical torture was joined by a horrifying psychological breakdown. The effects of severe dehydration, sunstroke, and constant stress led to mass delirium. The descent into insanity. Hallucinations. Men started seeing imaginary ships, rescue planes, and non-existent islands complete with palm trees and fresh water. Many victims swam away from the group toward these phantoms, only to drown or become easy prey for the sharks. Saltwater madness. Desperate men began drinking the ocean water. This caused extreme hallucinations and violent vomiting. These victims were often pushed away from the group because their thrashing and screaming attracted the sharks. Mutiny and murder. In one large group, a delusional sailor believed he was guarding the imaginary water supply and started murdering his comrades with a knife, stabbing men he believed were trying to steal his water. Other groups descended into fighting over debris in life vests. Discipline holds, for some. In a few groups, often led by senior officers or petty officers, discipline held. They established routines, took turns looking for planes, and enforced the rule, no one drinks the salt water. This structure was the primary differentiator between the groups that survived and those that perished. The accidental discovery. On the 5th day, August 2, 1945, hope arrived not through a Navy patrol, but through a fortunate accident. At 11 a.m., a PV-1 Ventura bomber, piloted by Lieutenant Chuck Gwynn, was on a routine patrol when he noticed an unusually long oil slick on the water. Following standard procedure, he banked the plane to investigate. He didn't see a ship, but he saw something infinitely worse. Hundreds of small black dots scattered across the water. Gwynn descended and immediately recognized the scene of a disaster. He radioed for help, dropping his life raft and emergency transmitter. The first responders. The first plane on the scene to actively assist was a PBY-5A Catalina flying boat, piloted by Lieutenant Commander Adrian Marks. Realizing the men were dying quickly, Marks made the brave and unauthorized decision to land his massive plane on the open, rough ocean. It was a harrowing landing that nearly destroyed the aircraft. Marks used the plane's wings and fuselage to ferry and secure the most severely wounded men, violating strict protocol but saving dozens of lives. The search and rescue effort was finally underway, spanning 4 days and nights. Destroyers and other ships raced to the coordinates. The final tally and the legacy of injustice. When the final tally was made, the truth was staggering. Total crew, 1,195. Men who went into the water, approximately 890. Men rescued, 316. Over 570 men died during the 7-day ordeal. They were lost to the elements, dehydration, and the sharks. The court-martial. The U.S. Navy immediately sought a scapegoat for the massive embarrassment and failure to track the ship. They singled out Captain Charles B. McVeigh III. In a move that shocked the Navy community, McVeigh was charged and convicted of hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag, making him the only American captain in World War II to be court-martialed for losing his vessel to enemy action. The ultimate travesty. The the Navy flew the commander of the Japanese submarine Motitsura Hashimoto to the United States to testify that he could have sunk the Indianapolis whether it was zigzagging or not. Yet McVeigh was convicted. The hypocrisy, crucially evidence showing that McVeigh was never informed that the submarine danger in his area had increased and that the command center had failed to log or search for the missing ship, was downplayed or suppressed. McVeigh's career was destroyed. He received endless hate mail and phone calls from grieving families blaming him for the deaths of their sons. Tragically, in 1968, Captain McVeigh died by suicide. The Vindication, a fight for 55 years. The survivors of the Indianapolis spent decades fighting for their captain's honor. They knew he was a scapegoat for the institutional failures of the Navy command structure. Their campaign, fueled by the dedication of survivors like Dr. Lewis L. Haynes and a 12-year-old student named Hunter Scott, whose research revealed the full scope of the Navy's tracking failures, finally succeeded. In 2000, the U.S. Congress formally passed a resolution and President Bill Clinton signed it into law, clearing Captain McVeigh's service record. In 2001, the Secretary of the Navy officially exonerated him, finally acknowledging that he was not responsible for the sinking or the resulting loss of life. The story of the Indianapolis is a haunting American tragedy, a testament to extraordinary courage in the face of unimaginable suffering, and a painful, persistent scar on the conscience of the U.S. Navy.